Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shviz. We're going to conclude the Pedic today, Pedic Vav Halacha Dalid, and God willing, we'll start Pedic Zayin Halacha Aleph. We are learning today Daf Nun Aleph. We left off on Daf Nun Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid Taman Taninon by the dot, and we are actually discussing that originally there was a ban disallowing the importation of vegetables from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, because since Gush Eretz Amim is metamei, and when you have vegetables, you have many times clods of earth, pieces of earth on the vegetables. Chachamim did not want for us to proliferate tuma in Eretz Yisrael, so originally they prohibited importing, and ultimately that ban was lifted. The simplest explanation as to why in the times of Rabbi the ban was lifted was because there was a lack of vegetables in Eretz Yisrael. But the Gemara is going to continue to discuss interesting consequences that come to be halachically because of the fact that the ban was lifted. Now we're going to refer back to the Mishnah, right? Halacha Dalit. The Mishnah says that there are 2 items that may not be exported. May aretz l'chutz la'aretz. The first is shemen sreifa, which is truma oil that became tamei. On that, and if you remember, we gave 2 reasons for that. First of all, truma tahoira is not allowed to be exported because you're not allowed to make it tamei. Gush eretz amim and even avir eretz amim is tamei. So even though the truma is anyways tamei, the Chachamim said, since you cannot take truma tahoira out to chutz la'aretz, you may not even take truma Tameya. That's one reason. Another reason we explained is just like by kachim, when they have to be burned, psuli hamikdashim, they have to be burned within the boundaries in which it would have been consumed had it not become puzzle. Same thing with truma. Since truma is connected to the Holy Land, right? Biblically, produce from chutz la'aretz is not even chayiv in truma. Therefore, even though it's tamei, you have to burn it. And you can have hana from its burning, but you have to burn it also in that location, which means in Eretz Yisrael. Anyways, that was the rule. And Rabbi said that you are allowed to take it to Syria, but you're not allowed to take it, shemen sreifa, from Syria to Chutz La'aretz. So we're going to go back to that. The Gemara is going to bring a braisa that will discuss B'chlal, the status of shviz that was illegally taken out of Eretz Yisrael. Don't forget, shvius is the second item in the Mishnah that may not be taken out with the Rabbanan. What happens if you did so? We're going to have a big discussion about that. And finally, we're going to explain the last part of the Mishnah that tells us that midrabanan, you may not bring trumas chutz la'aretz. Some places, midrabanan, you have to be toirim u'ma'aser. Eretz Amoin, Moyev, Mitzrayim, Shinor, Surya, you're not allowed to bring it michutz la'aretz into Eretz Yisrael. And again, Rabbi says on that, hold on, that you are allowed to bring the truma of Surya into Eretz Yisrael, but you may not bring the truma of Chutz La'aretz into Surya. We Bechlal did not yet explain the reason. We're going to learn the reason today. Together with the reasoning, we're going to see the difference between truma and bikurim as we will conclude the 6th chapter. Now, I want to share a few words of introduction for the 7th chapter, which is very important. It says in Parshas Bahar, B'Hashgacha Pratis, we are learning this, Tavshin Pehei in the portions of Bahar B'Chukoisai, right? That V'hoisa Shabbos Haaretz Lochem Lo'achla. We're speaking about the produce of Shvius is Lochem Lo'achla. So first of all, we learned Lochem V'loy Lahefsit. Lo'achla V'loy Lahefsit. You can't waste it. Lochem for you V'loy L'Schaira. However, really, not only do we have those limitations, but we also have, Chazal understand that the word lochem is a more inclusive word than just to eat. Lochem means it's like yours. Lo'achla means only to eat. So there's a lot of limudim that come from this lochem lo'achla. First of all, there are usages that are allowed to be done with Peder Shvius, even if it's not for eating, but it has to be analogous to eating. So, for example, medicine. Since medicine is not shavu l'chol nefesh, not everyone needs to take medicine. So, therefore, Peder Shvius may not be used for medicinal purposes. dyeing purposes, to dye your garments, you are allowed to use Pei Shvius for, because everyone at some times everyone dyes their clothing. There's also another limud from Lochem La'achla that it has to be Hana Asai Ubi Urai Shava. We'll get to that when we learn this entire topic. And ultimately, we're going to see that there's a general Kedusha in the produce of Shvi'is, which means, Aleph, it all has to be left Hefker, which means it has to be left in a way where all are allowed to take it. Number two, when someone takes it, it has to be consumed in its usual manner. And many, many other pratim, which will be the topic of the 7th chapter, but let's get there when we get there. However, we are in the 6th chapter at the end, Daf Nun Amid Beis, all the way at the bottom of the Amid by the dot, Tamon, Taninon. Again, we mentioned that the ban to import vegetables into Eretz Yisrael was lifted, and now we'll see some consequences. We learned over there, the Gemara is bringing a Mishnah in Mesechtas Nedarim, that if a person makes a neder, they vow to abstain min hayarak, since by Nedarim halech achar loshen b'nei adam, when a person says vegetables, he does not have in mind wild vegetables. Wild vegetables are vegetables that have what the Chazal called a shem levai. So an endive is an endive, and then you have the wild endive, and so on and so forth. So any vegetable that has attached to it wild or another name, that's not included when you make a vow not to have vegetables. So let's begin. Min hayarak, if you make an eder not to have yarakos, muter biyarkos hasadam. You are allowed to have a yerek that's known as yerek hasadam, wild vegetable, because shehu shem levai. That's the Mishnah. On that, we learned the B'raisa v'tana law that there is an exception. Any item that doesn't have just its pure name, you accompany a name to it. Yerek sadam. If a person makes a vow to abstain from having yirakos and shvi'is, even though we learned the rule, it does not include yerek sadeh. On shvi'is, it includes yerek sadeh. Why does it include yerek sadeh? Because since we are not allowed to have yirakos, b'chlal, why are you not allowed to have yirakos? Because svichin is asr midrabanan. And interestingly, when Chazal made the rabbinic ban, that's something that grew spontaneously on the 7th, and you take it out of the ground on the 7th, rabbinically you're not allowed to consume it, that did not include wild vegetables. Why not? I'll tell you why. The reason why they made the ban is because they didn't want people to plant vegetables and to claim it grew on its own. Wild vegetables means vegetables that grow on their own. No one plants wild vegetables. So the reason for the Isur Svichim never went on wild vegetables. So ironically, on the year of Shvi'is, what were the vegetables that people would eat? Dafka, wild vegetables. So now if you make a vow on Shvi'is, but I'm making a vow that all of the Yerakos are usher on me, you had in mind the wild vegetables because that was the only vegetables that people would eat other than making the vow, without making the vow. Even without the vow, you don't have vegetables because of the Isur of Svicha. Okay, so that's the Mishnah, and that's the B'raisa. Now, get what's happening now. Daf Nun Aleph. So now, Tanei, we learned that Rab Krispa b'Shem Rab Chanani ben Gamliel. Hadot Teimar. Hadot Teimar. When does the B'raisa stand? That on the year of Shvi'is, when you make a vow to abstain from vegetables, that does include Yarkoi Sadeh. That was only actually Hitter Rebbe Luhavi Yarik Mechutz Laretz Laaretz. That's only before Rebbe took away the ban to import. And therefore, the only vegetables that were found in the Holy Land was Yarkoi Sadeh. So therefore, it makes sense that when you made a vow not to have Yarakos, you meant Yarkoi Sadeh. That was the only one available. Avol Mishahita Rebbe Luhavi Yarik Mechutz Laretz Laaretz. But now that Rebbe lifted the ban, which means that on the year of Shvi'is, in the Holy Land, there was plenty of vegetables to be consumed. People imported the vegetables and they sold them. So now we go back to the rule of the Mishnah, that even on the year of Shvi'is, if a person makes a vow to abstain from vegetables, they only had in mind vegetables and not any vegetable that has with it an accompanied name. He Shvi'is, he Sha'ar Shnei Shavuam. Beautiful. And now the Gemara is going to bring you another interesting consequence from the lifting of the ban. Ulshin, And here we're speaking dafka about wild endives. They are significant enough. L'tamei tumas oichlin b'shvi'is. So here we go. During the other years, not during the shvi'is years, wild endives are not considered food enough, are not human food enough for them to be included in the laws of Tuma and Tara. Even though, truth be told, even during the other 6 years, if someone specifically intended to eat their wild endives, then they gave it the chashivus of human food, and it will be included in the laws of Tuma and Tara. Could acquire Tuma, it can impart Tuma, as are the rules of Tuma Seicholin. But if without a specific intent, wild endives are not considered human food, and therefore they can never become tummy. However, on that, says Rabbi Yeshua ben Rabbi Chanina, same logic, that since during Shvi'is, regular endives may never be eaten. Why not? Because of Svichim, Yederabanan. The only endives available are wild endives. So on Shvi'is, even without specific intent, Ulshin are already automatically chashuv, and they are included in the dinim of Tumas Eicholin. And here again, the Gemara says, now that we know that Rebbe at some point lifted the ban, so Hadad the Teimar, that only works ad shaloi hit the Rebbe. But once Rebbe allowed people to import vegetables, which includes endives, so again, why would a person go eat something that otherwise they would not eat? The only reason would be is because there's no other alternative. Once you have the regular alternative, which is regular endives, he shviz, he shnar, shnei shavua, that without someone having specific intent that they will eat their wild endives, it's by default not considered food for human consumption, and therefore it's not subject to all of the rules of Tuma and Tara. Weiter. Gemara moving back to the Mishnah, referring back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah told us that there were 2 items that Chazal did not allow us to export. One is, like we explained in the words of introduction, Shemen Sreifa. Shemen Sreifa literally means burnt oil. It means oil that has to be burnt. What oil has to be burnt? Truma oil that became Tameh, and that's because there is a general rule that Truma Tameh may not be eaten by Kohanim. Of course, non-Kohanim cannot eat anything, ever, Truma. But once it becomes Tameh, they are allowed to have Hana'ah from burning it. They used it for fuel. They used it for warmth, but you have to burn it. So it's called Shemen that has to be burnt. And the Chazal made a ban for you not to be allowed to export it. Now, the Tanakama made a general statement. Ein moitziin Shemen Sreifa. Rebbe said, and we're going to have to understand what Rebbe is saying. Rebbe says that I heard explicitly that you are allowed to take it into Surya, and the way we learned the Mishnah, but you cannot take Shemen Sreifa from Surya to outside of Surya to complete Chutz La'aretz. The question the Gemara is going to have in this statement of Rebbe, as well as we'll have in the next statement of Rebbe, is the Tanakama arguing with Rebbe? Or is Rebbe simply clarifying and everyone is of the same opinion? So says the Gemara, that happened by Meimar, that initially when the Talmidim learned the Mishnah, they didn't understand that the Rebbe and the Tanakama are in disagreement. They felt that loy peligan, everyone is in agreement. The Tanakama says, Shemen Sreifa, you cannot take out L'chutz La'aretz, and Rebbe clarified, hold on a second, from Eretz Yisrael to Surya, yes, but from Surya to Chutz La'aretz, of course, from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz, no. But Surya is considered part of Eretz Yisrael for these dinim. That is the way they initially approached the Mishnah. But actually, later, Ashkach Taneh, they found the Braisa. What did they find in the Braisa? So let's quote the Braisa. That Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ad Keziv. Ad Keziv means that when you are in Israel, in the territory that was conquered by Oila Bavel, there is to where you could transport Shvi'is produce. Now this is referring to the second takon in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to export Peidah Shvi'is l'chutz la'aretz. So Rabbi Yehuda says, what does it mean chutz la'aretz? You can't take it out of the territory of Oilei Bavel. You cannot even take it into the territory of Oilei Mitzrayim. That's already considered chutz la'aretz for Peidah Shvi'is. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that even up until Amana, we just had this last week, That means even in territories that were not settled by Oila Bavel, as long as they were settled by Oila Mitzrayim, it's considered enough. It's considered enough Eretz Yisrael that when they made the ban not to export Pei Shvius, it does not apply to the territory of Oila Mitzrayim. You are allowed to take it to the territory of Oila Mitzrayim. Okay, now what's unsaid, Bein Rabbi Yehuda, Bein Rabbi Shimon, both are in agreement that you're not allowed to take it to Syria. And therefore, just like we have in the second ban in the Mishnah regarding taking Peiros Shvi'is me'aretz l'chutz la'aretz, and Rabbi says that I heard explicitly that you are allowed to take it to Syria, but you can't take it from Syria to chutz la'aretz. There clearly there is a machloikes between these two Tanoim and Rabbi. So once they found that there was a machloikes with Rabbi, they said logically in the Reisha, in the first takana of Shem and Sreifa, there's also a machloikes. That's the way you have to learn. In other words, once you see something is not unanimous, it makes more sense to say that Rabbi was speaking about his opinion. But the Tanakama that says that Ein Moitzi and Shem and Sreifa, they also include Surya. Okay, so now we have a machloikes. Now, the Gemara wants to know what were to happen if you did take out Peiros Shvi'is me'aretz l'chutz la'aretz. Whether it means to Surya, which is asur l'tanakama, whether it means ma'aretz to real chutz la'aretz, which is prohibited according to everyone, even according to Rebbe, you cannot take it from Surya to chutz la'aretz. What will be the din? What will be the din of that produce? Let me begin with biur. Does the person who removed it, do they have to trouble themselves to bring it back into Eretz Yisrael when the time of biur comes? That's one thing we have to look at. Let's read inside the Braisa. So for that we have a Braisa. Tani we learned. Peiros ha'aretz sheyatzu chutz la'aretz. Sheyatzu chutz la'aretz. So the din is that once, even though you were not allowed to take it out, but you took it out before the time of biur. Now that the time of biur came, because that product in your locality, in the Holy Land, from where it came from, in the Medina from which it came from, it's no longer found l'chaya asher ba'artzecha. So now you have to do the act of biur, machloikes rishonim, whether it means you have to remove it from your home and actually destroy it, shitas Rambam, or we're going to go with the Ramban, you have to remove it from your home, you have to declare it ownerless, and once you declared it ownerless, either Bein Aniyim, Bein Ashirim can take it back, or only Aniyim can take it back, but you don't have to destroy it. Whatever biur is, what do you do if you took Peiros me'ha'aretz l'chutz la'aretz? So that Shimon, that Rashbi says, Misbarim imekayman, we don't trouble you, you're not chayiv to take it back in. Whatever biur is, you have to do, but do it wherever you are. Aber nicht Rab Shimon Lazar Omer, I disagree with that. Mevi'en la'aretz, you have to bring it back to Eretz Yisrael and do the act of biur. The Chsiv, again, Hashgacha Prat is this week's Parshas Hashavua Bahar, as it says, yesterday's Chitas, Ba'artzecha tihiyeh kol tfu'asa lechoil. And so the Chazal learn that the Ba'artzecha also means that when it's no longer found, l'chaya, and you have to do the act of biur, it has to be done be'artzecha. Wow. Says the Gemara, okay, now we have a machlekes. Whose opinion do we follow? Halacha l'maisa, Amar Rabbi Yaakov Aracham, Hoyne Ravimim, Kahon Tanoa Kamaya, that when it came to such a question, someone accidentally took it out, Peiros Shvi'is l'chutz la'aretz. Came the time of biur, and they asked Rav Imi, and he paskin like the first Tana, Kahon Tanoa, which is Rashbi, which is Lekulam. Now, everyone agrees, Chavra, don't forget, you should not take it out. There's no debate about that. It has to stay in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Shimon is not going against the Takana and the Mishnah. Everyone subscribes to the Takana. It's a post facto. Can you remind me, what do we do with the Esrogim? Do we ship them back? I think we're supposed to. I think we have to take them back to Israel, right? We let it wither away until it's no longer a peta. That's what we do.
Until it shrinks, yeah.
It shrinks completely. Yeah. No, then since now it's not considered a peta, now we're not limited to the issue of what you need to do.
A lot of people dafka buy the Italian esrogim in the year of Shvius.
That's because of this. Exactly. Oh, 1 second. Amar Rafilo says Rafilo. Even though we take a paskan like the Rashbi, but one thing at least. That means that if a person is outside Eretz Yisrael with something that should not have been there, but it's there, the time of beer came. Don't say that since I'm not in Eretz Yisrael, I don't have to do it immediately. The obligation of doing beer, bismana beer, that is the same. The nafkamina will be is that if you would have done the right thing, it would have been with you in the Holy Land. It would have been in Eretz Yisrael. Now that you took it out, now you are in LA. But the moment the time of beer came, immediately do the beer, however beer is done, and don't allow yourself to keep it and take it with you here to there. I can't do beer here. I'm going to a Pesach program. I'm going to burn the chametz over there. You can't do that. You got to get rid of it the moment the time of beer comes. Now, guys, the time of beer we didn't learn yet inside. It's not about where you are. It's about where the produce came from. That, like we mentioned many times, that Eretz Yisrael is divided into 3 medinos. Don't confuse this with Shalosh Haratzos. We are learning. We just came off Pedic Shalosh Haratzos. Shalosh medinos means is that when the Torah says that it has to, that the produce is for you, for your behemoths are domesticated, and for your chayas asher ba'artzecha. So Chazal say, when are your behemoths allowed to eat it? When it's nimtza basada to the chayas. We're nimtza basada for the chayas in that medina, and that's something that we're going to learn later. What are the territories of each one of the medinos? But if in your territory, meaning in the territory in which the apple grew, in which whatever it is that you have grew, Peder Shvius, once it's no longer nimtza out there in the fields to the chayas, which will include produce that does not survive winter, that's the way it works. So when winter comes, it's going to freeze or it's going to wither, so it's no longer there. Now it's not found lachaya. The moment it's not found lachaya, you cannot even give it to the behema, nor to yourself. Okay.
Is Rabbi Hila giving his rule for if you're out? Meaning, if you have your payers outside of Eretz Yisrael, what about if you had it in Eretz Yisrael? Same thing,
then for sure you have to do beer right away. In other words, this is dafkan the braisa. We go like Rab Shimon, right? You don't have to take it back to Eretz Yisrael. You don't have to take it back, but don't think since you don't have to take it back, you're good. I'm gonna do beer in a month. It doesn't work that way.
And according to the other opinion, you have to bring it back, but you don't have to bring it back immediately.
But I don't know. That's a good question. No, because it could be that the chumrah brings to a kula, which is normally what happens. I don't think you're going to be chayiv to jump back to the Holy Land. Now there's a boycott against travel. Only Alal is traveling. So what are you going to do? Pay you $2,800 for an economy ticket and go back over there to make a Jew wealthy? It's a good idea. At least the money is going to Ayid. All right. Okay, Chavre, let's go to the last part of the Mishnah. The last part of the Mishnah tells us the final takana, which we never explained, that one is not allowed to bring trumas chutz la'aretz, which is midrabanan, just to make it clear. And no, chutz la'aretz does not mean LA, like we mentioned. According to most of the Rishonim, chutz la'aretz is the trumas chutz la'aretz will include Amoin Moav, the territory that was conquered by Sichon, that was subsequently conquered by the Yidden through Moshe Rabbeinu, and Shinar. And Mitzrayim, and on a side, Surya. We're going to go with that. And so you have Truma Midrabanan. So Chazal say you're not allowed to bring it inside Eretz Yisrael. And here again, says Rabbi, and again the presumption will be is that Rabbi argues with the Tanakama. He says that you are allowed to bring it from Surya into Eretz Yisrael. Surya stands by itself. You're not allowed to bring it, let's say, from Eretz Amoin into Surya. He puts Surya Bechlal Eretz Yisrael. We read that Asherilio, I think, on Friday or on Thursday. There are actually some who understand that the Rebbe is of the opinion that kibush yachid shmei kibush. Syria is now, we're more or less Aram Tzoiva. It's right now where Syria is, and a little bit of Lebanon, for sure, including Damascus. Yeah, King David conquered it. We conquered it in our days. The difference is David HaMelech conquered it and he kept it. Today, there's a virus. We conquer it and we give it away. All right. Okay, says the Gemara. From this, the Gemara doesn't dive right into explaining the reason why you're not allowed to, but from this we'll understand the reason for it. And we're right away going to go me'inyan le'inyan to the inyan of Bikurim. So let's begin quoting a Mishnah Masechtas Chala. How great is it, guys? We're learning parts of Torah Shebal Peh that, we learned the Rambam, but we're going to find many more pratim that otherwise we would not have the merit to learn. Hamon Taninin a Mishnah Chala. Aristoin, how amazing is that? We're quoting a name of a person. Not Aristotle, guys. Aristoin, Rabbi spoke about him. Hevi Bikurav Apamya. Apamya is a city in Syria. And he separated, and this is a new thing, guys. We're going to Bikurim. Don't get confused. He separated Bikurim. And he brought Bikurim into Yerushalmi. Bisman Bayesheni. And you know what? Vikiblu mimenu. They allowed it. So first of all, we see over here that just like the Chachamim decreed, this is important, that Syria is a location in which you have to separate Trumas Umaisris. So evidently, Syria is a location. Don't forget, Bikurim is a Truma, is like the category of Truma. It has Kedusha. It's not like Truma that can be given and eaten anywhere. It has to be taken to Yerushalmi. You have to take it to the Beis HaMikdash. You have to make a declaration. You have to give it to a kohen, and then the kohen eats it. So he brought Bikurim, and they accepted it. Now, I want to remind everyone that don't forget there is Tumas Eretz Ha'amim is a problem. So it's not so pashut for you to bring Bikurim into Eretz Yisrael if the Bikurim fruits became Tameh. However, there's the simplest way of guaranteeing that the Bikurim will not become Tameh, even though it grew in Eretz Ha'amim, which will include Syria, is if you don't allow the fruits after you detach them to become wetted with the shivas, with the 7 liquids. Yat Shachadam. It never got wet. That's called Shmura. You were shoymed it from becoming moist from when you harvested these fruits. Even if a bona fide Tomei mace, Midairaisa, touched it, won't become tummy, cannot acquire Tuma, which is what happened. They trusted him. Okay, so now, Frag the Gemara. You see from the Mishnah that Bikurim is allowed to be brought. I know from Syria. Now that we already established that Rabbi is the one when he says that you can bring Truma from Syria into Eretz Yisrael, but the Tanna Kama disagrees. The Yerushalmi doesn't have to talk it out because we already spoke it out on Amud Aleph. Now that we found that Braisa, on the current understanding of the Talmidim is that the Rebbe is arguing always with the Tanna Kama, which means that Tanna Kama does not allow you to bring Truma from Syria into Eretz Yisrael. Here in Masechtas Chala, we have a Maisa Rav, that they accepted Bikurim from Syria to Eretz Yisrael. How will Rebbe explain that? Rebbe is not arguing with that. Rebbe is only arguing with Truma. So the Frek the Gemara v'Yavi Truma. And the only way to answer it is by understanding why did they make the Gzeira. And let's Amar Rab Hoishayom. I'll explain to you why. First of all, there is a big difference between Bikurim and Truma. And let me say it by heart. After you designate Bikurim, you still did not fulfill your obligation. You have to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. Another din of Bikurim, you have to bring it to the Beis HaMikdash yourself. And that's called your Chayiv Ba'achrayis or Ba'achrayis Ba'olim. Very unlike Truma, I have to separate Truma. I don't have to give my Truma to a Kohen. A Kohen would come collect the Truma from me. The Chabad rabbi wants Bikurim. I don't want to fundraise. I don't want to go pick up the check. You bring it to me. And the donor says, okay, Truma, Bikurim. I'll designate money for tzedakah. And then every person has to go and vie to get my dollars for tzedakah. Bikurim, Truma. So very good. So Amar Rabbi Shaya, Bikurim, because it's called Ba'achrayis Ba'olim. Therefore, we allow, even after the ban of bringing Truma, we allow for the owner to bring Bikurim to Eretz Yisrael. Since trumas eina ba'achrayis ba'olam, as we explained, the kohen collects truma. The owners don't have to deliver the truma. Once we establish that, im amar at kain, if truma will be allowed to be imported into Eretz Yisrael, now how do you get truma? The owners don't have to gift it. The recipient, the kohen, comes and he picks it up and he comes and gets it. So what were to happen? The kohanim are going to go to Chutz La'aretz to pick up their truma. Now, leaving Eretz Yisrael has two problems, Yakir. Number one, there's a general prohibition on someone who lives in Eretz Yisrael, according to very extreme opinions, even if you don't live there. If you just went to visit there, you're not allowed to leave. You're there, you're not allowed to leave. On top of that, there's a specific problem for a kohen leaving Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because Eretz Yisrael is a land that has in it tahara, and the Chazal said, Gush Eretz Ha'amim, and then they would Musakin Avir Eretz Ha'amim is Matame. Now you get it. If you would allow for Trumas Chutz La'aretz to come into the Holy Land, what would happen? People designate Truma wherever they are. No one delivers it to the Kohen. So it's going to motivate Kohanim to go to Chutz La'aretz to go get that Truma. That's why they said you can't bring it in. That reason is not shaykh by bikurim, because bikurim is something that's called b'achrayis ba'olim. How great is that? The gewaldige difference. And on that we say hadran aloch shalosh arotzois.
The owner has to keep it.
The owner has to take it to the recipient. So since the owner is taking it into Israel, we're good with that. We want people to go to Eretz Yisrael. We don't want people to leave Eretz Yisrael. We certainly do not want Kohanim to leave Eretz Yisrael. Simple. So they said that Trumas Chutz La'aretz cannot be imported. So who got that Truma? Kohanim that were anyways living there. But Kohanim that were in Eretz Yisrael wouldn't even go to get it. Look how many Mishulachim come around the world collecting money. They would make a gzeira, which God forbid, that the money of Chutz La'aretz should not go to Eretz Yisrael. All of the Mishulachim will stay in the Holy Land. But that's a horrible idea. That's a horrible idea. You have a story from one of the Alter Rebbe's, Rabbi Nachman Lov Haradok, who lived ultimately by Tiberia, that he said that all of the prayers, he used to meditate every Friday with his pipe by the Kineris, and he said like this, that all of the prayers of the world, they oila l'shamayma through between Chevron and Makam HaMikdash, Shara Shamayim. Problem is that all of our prayers are tamei, because they're coming from Chutz La'aretz. So all of our tefillos prior to entering the Holy Land, they have to go through Tiberia. They're toiveled in the Kineris, because you have over there the Be'er Miriam. That's what he said. And that Tahara allows the prayers to go up. Aber the Kineris doesn't want to have our impure prayers. But since people of Chutz La'aretz, they give money to Eretz Yisrael tzedakah, so on the merit of the tzedakah that we give, the Kineris allows itself to be used for our tefillos to be toiveled in it. And there's a whole story in Kanamakim, how one time there was a big Geneva and all of the Koilel Chabad money, or it was still Koilel Hasidim, whichever part of the history was stolen somewhere in Turkey. And the whole thing was, we got a problem that all of the prayers for the next year won't ascend heavenward. Because tefillah is like bikurim. A prayer is your offering to God. Not that Hashem has to pick up your prayers. You have to send it. You have to deliver it. Beautiful. Okay, Chavra. We are really diving into the Masechta now, when we're moving on to the 7th chapter, in which, like we spoke out in the words of introduction, and this is the key, when the Torah says in Parshas Bahar, that V'hoisa Shabbos ha'aretz lochem la'achla. So first of all, the la'achla limits what food can be used for. La'achla means to eat it and not to waste it. La'achla v'loy la'hefseid. La'achla v'loy l'schayra, you cannot do business with it. Let me just clarify the business part. A person is allowed to sell small quantities of Peiros Shvis. Where did they get it from? From anywhere, right? I can take a little bit of food in my backyard, as I can take it from your backyard, as I can take it from my fellow's field. It's available, not the field. The field belongs to you. But the Peiros that is on the field, can be taken by all. Don't forget, parenthetically, that svichim are asan midrabanan. So we're not talking about svichim. We're talking about non-svichim, something that fruit, peiros, let's just say, etc., etc., etc. And we already learned that even by svichim, the Chazal were not goizer on svichim, on yarkoi sode. Yarkoi sode is allowed to be eaten, even though it grew spontaneously on Shvi'is, and you're taking it out of the ground on Shvi'is. That's something that may be eaten up until the time of beer. I'm saying up until the time of beer because most, even wild vegetables, do not survive the winter in the ground. At some point, it's no longer found out there, and then there's a whole new din of beer. But before the time of beer, if there is a time of beer, so just to know, I'm allowed to take a small amount of peiros and sell it. For what purpose? For me to eat. I need to eat. So let's say I want to eat meat, but meat costs over here, I don't know, $90 for a little piece of steak. So you need money for that. So if a person doesn't have money, they are allowed to take peiros shvius, just to know that, and sell it. They're not violating schayda. Schayda means you can't merchandise. Merchandise means you're collecting a lot of it, you're selling a lot of it, you're gathering a lot of money to pay the rent. That you can't do. Enough peiros to sell one time, to eat a meal right now is mutter. But know one thing, guys. This is important for this Mishnah. Peiros shvius is limited because it's holy. So you can't merchandise it. You cannot waste it. You cannot take it out of Eretz Yisrael. It's subject to beer, right? We're already covering many dinim. We're going to call all of that a consequence of it being holy. If I have peiros shvius, right? I have apples, and I sold it to you, I need to know one thing. Whatever grew itself will never become deconsecrated. Unlike the general rule, we're not speaking about kachem mizbeach, we're speaking about even kache bedek habayis, right, Yakir? If I have a coin that I donated for the temple treasury, once that coin that the treasurers took on the Beis Hamikdash, and they bought wood for the building, they bought something that they needed, the person who got paid for it can use the money for anything they want, because the kedusha of the money went into the item. It was mischalal on the item. That's the way things normally work. Shvius has a unique chumrah. That which grew will always remain holy. The money that was received, or if you bartered it, some people can barter. They want a steak, they have apples, so they exchange it. The item that was exchanged for the peiros shvius is also imbued with the kedusha of shvius. So you can't take it out of Eretz Yisrael. You can't do merchandise. It becomes bound to the same rules of the original peiros shvius. It's amazing. Even though the original peiros shvius did not lose its kedusha. It never becomes. Now what happens? Let's say if I have the apple is ground zero. It grew on shvius, and I exchange it for your meat. Now these two items have kedusha shvius. What happens if someone takes your meat and he barters it for a piece of fish? Now the meat became deconsecrated, but the fish has kedusha. In other words, the original item remains holy, and the final item remains holy. The in-betweens could become that which acquired. If you got it, you can lose it. If you were born with it, you can never lose it. A Jew is a Jew. You're born a Jew. Nothing you can do. A good thing, thank God. Okay, this will be, I think, enough of Hagdama to the Klal Gadol. So let's begin. Okay, one more nukuda, even though we spoke it out many times. Not everything is subject to a beer. Many peiros shvius is not subject to beer because if this item does not get somehow destroyed naturally during winter, many items, if they can remain in the ground and stay and survive the winter, so it will never be subject to beer, even though it's bona fide peiros shvius. Peiros shvius, we just learned today, right? Tuma and tara is only by tumas for human consumption. Food that's not designated for human consumption is not included in the laws of tuma sechalin. Shvius not only includes meichel adam, shvius includes foods that are by default designated for animals, and even herbs, plants that are generally used for dyeing clothing, for coloring clothing. All of that is included in the dinim of peiros shvius. That's the, like we mentioned, lochem, lo'achla, lo'chayda, you would say means human consumption. But the words lochem is very inclusive. Anything that you'll use. So Chazal says that we make this type of compromise. The lochem broadens the eating, but it has to be similar to you eating, as we'll see, as we'll go learn inside. Let's go.
What about the clothes? Back to clothes?
So Dan is asking, if you dye your clothing with shviz, does that mean you cannot take the clothing out of Israel? I don't know the answer. We'll see. I'm sure it's going to be explicit. Very good. So let's go. Sometimes Rabbeinu HaKadosh writes a klal, and then you have klal gadol. Klal gadol is not so common. I know we just had it in Parshas Kedoshim. Just for the record, Amar Rabbi Akiva writes Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. Where does it say? Who knows? No? That I know. That's in Parshas Kedoshim. But Amar Rabbi Akiva, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. Where is this Maimer Chazal? So it's a Medrash and it's a Yerushalmi. Just to know, you don't have this in the Bible. Rashi brings it from a Medrash, but it's a Medrash. Rashi, I think, quotes in a Chamed. He tells you what Medrash. Okay, right. That's klal gadol. Klal gadol on b'shviz, like this. Kol shu Michael Adam. And even Michael Behema, this is beautiful. This is the big rule. And even mimin hatsoivim, that means that it's dye stuff. Now, this is enough for it to be included in the kedusha of shviz. But our Mishnah is also speaking about the rules of biur. For something to be subject to biur, it's only if ve'enoi miskayim ba'aretz, like we explained, because if the product that's left unpicked will not decompose, it will be miskayim, it will not be subject to biur. So if it's human food or animal food or even mimin soivim, and on top of that, it does not endure in the ground, it decomposes during the winter. At some point it decomposes. All of the dinim of shvius apply to it. Yesh loy shvius, we're speaking about the kedusha of shvius. If you exchanged it for money, as we said, ba'ofen hamuter, or for another item, uladama of shvius, that's the big chiddush of shvius, unlike, let's say, berek habayis money, and yesh loy biur, and not only that, but if you made an exchange, even lidama of biur. Wow. In other words, since the kedusha of the original Peder Shvius is fully imparted to the money or to the food, whatever it got imparted to is bound by all of the laws, even to biur. Wow. Let's go. Now the Mishnah will give you examples.
What does that mean? You put a pile of money outside?
Yes, Danny. Yes, you put a pile of money outside.
And then according to the Ramban, you take it back?
According to the Ramban, well, the Machlekes Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, who someone can take it. According to the Rambam, 1 second, even according to the Rambam, you have to destroy it. He says that mazan shalish she'udis can be used. You declare it hefker. So what you do is you get all of your chaverim, you make a big chassidish of habrengen. You have a lot of money, you right away, you make enough food for 100 people. Okay, let's give examples. So ale haluf hashoite, all right? By the way, there's a chiddush over here. The chiddush over here is that the wild luf that we keep on learning about is very bitter. And without cooking it, you can't eat it. It's considered food stuff. We don't say it's nothing. Va'ale harandana, where's kevan? Mint. Ha'ulshen, we're speaking about wild endives. It's still considered a food for human food. V'hakareshim leaks. V'regila is parashu laka. And then you can make all the comments you wanted. I went on Google and I look at the pronunciation and it's clear that that's how you pronounce it. The Neitza Chalav and Milky Blossom. I have no idea what these things are. Now, what's about Michael Behema? Another examples. We're speaking about soft. Thorns and thistles, but they have to be softish enough that animals can eat it. And what's b'minatzoivim? Sfiche is this. Turning to the afternoon base and koitzam. Now, on all of these items, like we concluded the first klal, yesh lem shvius, ul demeim shvius, yesh lem biur, ul demeim biur. That's the first klal gadol of today's Mishnah. And tomorrow we continue with the oid klal acher to be